Hi everyone, glad to be here. I'll run through a bit of a deck here which is going to be up front. Probably the first half we'll be talking about some stats and some trends that we're seeing in the industry. I kind of have spoken about this a few times over the years, but we've updated and we're kind of seeing some new stuff coming out of that. And then I'll talk about what's coming out with us and show you our connected BIM, our BIM cloud that's being used by a number of projects right now. So some of these stats on industry adoption, first of all, this is one that we've kind of been going over the years, and every year it seems to be kind of growing exponentially, and that's because it keeps on doubling. And this is just one measure of whether the projects that we're seeing are doing BIM, and that one measure is have they got a model file on their projects, and you can see that the number of model files is just accelerating away. It's now, you know, it's about to over 1.5 million. It's kind of by the end of this year it'll be about 1.8, which is an enormous number of model files that people are sending around on their projects. Given that we're just at the moment, you know, the way that we've been dealing with projects in the past has been very much just around their helping manage their BIM files, whereas in the future it's much more about the data inside those models. The other one, which is this trend is kind of continuing, is that the average file size for these models is kind of flatlining at around the 50 or 60 meg mark. It's kind of bouncing around a little bit, but it kind of accelerated quickly over back in 08, 09, but people kind of naturally started breaking their models up into pieces as they got beyond that. Just helps send them around, helps people open them up on their desktops without too much hassle. A whole range of benefits, people working on separate areas. Like we know that the Adelaide Hospital, for example, they've got their architectural model broken up into 16 pieces, so people are breaking it up kind of naturally. Having said that, there are some enormous single model files out there, and the one on the left is the one I showed last year, which is the top 25 model files, and the one on the right is as of today, or as of a couple of days ago. So you can see that of the top 25 from last year, 15 of them have dropped off the list because people are continuing to put up even bigger and bigger and bigger single model files, which is, you know, when we looked at it in the past, I kind of looked at the top 10 and they were all out of the Middle East, and I thought, okay, that's because they're doing kind of crazy projects over there. But Australia seems to be joining in on the insanity a little bit, and they're putting up enormous file sizes as well now. This is an interesting chart that keeps on growing up. So we've kind of been measuring the percentage of live projects that have BIM in some way, and that's, do they have a model file? Are they collaborating around BIM in some way? And that's been growing really, really quickly since 2008, and we kind of crossed the halfway point, which is kind of that, for me, that critical tipping point back about a year ago, back in June, I think it was, 2013, where beyond that point, half of, or most of the projects that we were running were doing BIM in some way. So that's it's not the early adopters anymore. It's not even a minority. It's the majority of projects are doing BIM in some way, and that continues to kind of grow up. It's kind of slowing off a little bit, as you can see, and that's kind of natural. It'll kind of tend to flatten out, and it'll be interesting to see where that number ends up to be over the years. This next chart, however, it's a slightly messy one, and I'll try and explain what I meant by this one. But what I was trying to figure out here is look at a bit of regional analysis of where different regions around the world are heading with their adoption of BIM. And the bars are deliberately faded into the background. They're there for the data, the raw data of year-on-year increase, percentage year-on-year increase. And then what I've done is, because that data it kind of chops and changes year to year, we're trying to put some trends on that. So the lines are actually the smooth 3 or 4 year trend lines. So you can see that the Australian market, that's that green line, the year-on-year growth was accelerating up, and it got up to like 300% year-on-year growth, which is kind of, you can't really sustain that very, very long, and that's kind of now come down, and it's kind of hovering now at around the 100% growth year-on-year number. The European kind of segment or region kind of was slightly behind that, and wasn't quite as high on the peak, but it's kind of following the same kind of arc. Asia's following that same arc, slightly behind again, but not quite as pronounced. The growth there is a little bit subdued. And then finally, you've got the Americas market kind of looking like, so far, it's a bit early to tell, I think, following that same arc. So really what it is there's a really strong acceleration of growth, which gets up to kind of dizzying levels of year-on-year adoption, and then it kind of settles down a little bit. The one that's kind of the anomaly a little bit is the Middle East, which is the one that kind of peaks right off the top of the chart and then comes back down and joins the rest of them. And that was really because during kind of 2007, 2008, the growth in the Middle East region was 2,700% or something, just out of, like, off the charts. So that was because the boom was going on there. People were doing all sorts of, you know, the activity levels in that region were just off the charts. So that naturally stopped with the GFC. They came back crashing back down to earth, and over the next couple of years they were down in their little doldrum. But we've noticed actually that region, the Middle East region in particular, has recovered, not back to its dizzying heights, which is kind of good. They're back to what we consider a normal, sustainable level of growth. A bit hard to see, I'm sorry about the fuzziness, but I hope you can kind of get something out of that. Some other trends that we're predicting over the coming years, that, you know, they may come true, they may not, but this is kind of what we think we'll be seeing, is one around this kind of connectedness of the project team. How many people on the project team are touching the data in these models? At the moment, it's really low. There's kind of like sub 10% of the number of companies in a project are actually touching this model data or getting anything out of it, and we think that will grow substantially over the next 2, 3, 4 years, where people who currently don't access it will access it, and they'll start contributing to it as well. We think that the number of orgs touching the BIM data will outpace the growth in the number of models. So the growth in the number of models will grow as it does, but we think that the growth in the number of orgs getting involved will be at a higher growth pattern than that, which is really another way of saying that the collaborative nature of these projects is going to expand more than the growth in the models is. And the other one is that the number of linkages to data outside the model files will explode, and that's really because the model file kind of has geometry and it has some properties that people are starting to embed into it, but there's a whole heap of other information on the project that the model can become a really effective coat hanger for that information to hang off. So if you think about the hierarchy of objects and spaces in these models, if you can then start linking up all of the other stuff on projects, all of the 2D drawings, all of the other, you know, the commissioning sheets, all of that other stuff that you capture on a project, if you can use that coat hanger to effectively kind of pull that stuff together, that actually creates the interrelationship of the data, which is really one of the important things around BIM. So heading on to what is the future, and I kind of touched on it before. One of the key differences between what we've been doing in the past and what we're starting to do now is we had been helping people manage their BIM files, which is, as we all know, kind of only part of the BIM story. And now it's much more around the data. The file is really just a wrapper of getting some of that data around. So it's more than the model. There's a lot more stuff on a project that you need to capture and manage and interrelate, because you need to link all that stuff up together, and that's the coat hanger principle that we were talking about before, using that model as the central, or the hierarchy of the combined model set to create those linkages. And it needs to be accessible by everyone on the project. We've got this situation at the moment where a very small percentage of the project team are actually accessing it and contributing to it. That needs to expand, and the projects that we've seen in our beta program who have started using our new cloud environment have just, even the guys who didn't have access to the models before are just getting incredible, they're telling us they're getting incredible value out of just being able to see it, for one, let alone what they can then do beyond that. So just getting them over that hump and getting them involved with that data is a big step. And also it's much more than just design and construct, and there's a whole heap of value that you can get out of BIM by helping improve the constructability and the coordination and all those kind of great things which have real tangible near-term significant benefits. But there's also lots of benefits to be created by creating this, you know, fully interrelated set of data that's accurate and complete, that can be handed over to the client at the end of the project, who can then run their facility in a much more intelligent way with, you know, all of this stuff at their fingertips. So we think that there's a lot, you know, that will be the thing that will drive owners to adopt, and that kind of is what's driving owners to kind of mandate this kind of stuff in some other markets. We think that here in Australia, most of the BIM growth has been kind of driven by contractors and consultants who are trying to get benefits for their own business, but overseas, it's kind of, some markets it's driven by owners seeing this benefit that can come out of the handover of the information. So it's really, what we want to do is we want to create, as I kind of said before, this coat hanger around the objects and spaces hierarchy, and all of the other stuff, oh, that wasn't meant to go on, and all of the other stuff will kind of hang off around it. Another way of saying this is what we're doing. So this is our connected BIM environment. So really, first and foremost, what I try and get across is it's about data, not the files. The files are just the way of getting stuff from point A to point B. And there's got to be this kind of cloud server sitting underneath this that kind of underpins this. It takes all this data and kind of pulls it out of the file situation that it's in, and then allows us to do stuff with the data inside it. Then you've got to have visualization in the browser. People need to be able to view this stuff without having to install local software. So if you're taking it beyond, the design coordination team, then it's important that they can do it in a very simple way without having to install software, without having to download an installer, no exe files, none of that kind of stuff in the browser, which is actually a really difficult problem to solve well. And I'll show you in the demo later, but it's really easy to view large data sets with local software. That's been solved a long time ago. It's easy. It's really easy to view small data sets in a browser, like 100, 200 megabytes of data in a browser environment to visualize you can kind of do that out of the box. But getting beyond that is kind of the hard thing, and if you consider that the average file size is 50 or 60 meg, you don't have to merge too many models together before you start hitting the limit of that 1 or 200 meg limit. So we spent a lot of time over the last couple of years trying to figure out how to solve that, and we kind of about 9, 12 months ago got to 500 or 600 meg of kind of visualization in the browser, and we're currently at 1.2, 1.4 gig of visualization in the browser with no kind of local help. It's all done, and what I'll show you before, by the way, is on this machine, which the friendly AV guys up the back, when I was setting up, told me that I spent the first 5 minutes telling me how crap my laptop is. That's kind of deliberate because we want to make sure that it works with the most simple devices that people might have. It's no good us testing on machines that have really good graphics cards, because that's not what everyone has. So this has absolutely no graphics card on it apart from whatever's in the CPU, but we can still view and visualize this stuff in the browser pretty well. We want to help improve the coordination flows. We want to help this seamless file transfer, so having a plug-in to the authoring environment so that the people who are authoring don't have to do any kind of complicated, saving somewhere, then going to somewhere else to upload something. They should be able to be in their authoring tool and just click a button and it publishes their model information up to the cloud, and then vice versa. So kind of having those connections for seamless file transfer is important. Enriching the model is important, and it's something that we've kind of been doing forever, is kind of all the other stuff on a project that people manage, but then helping them link that up is important. You've got to make sure that the visualization, apart from it being large data sets, it's got to be really simple. I mean, we have had a 3D viewer, and a different one in the past, but and it had lots of whiz-bang features, but it was kind of a bit harder to use because people easily got lost in it. The navigation wasn't as slick and as simple, so it's important that it's really simple. The model validation piece is something else we do. So we kind of at the moment take the models and process them against the standards. But as this evolves, it'll move more into are the models complete and accurate given the contract and given the phase of the project. So that's something else that we'll be working on. And then finally is Open BIM. Clients are, it's fine for people to work in their native tools when they're doing the work, and that's something we will support and we think is absolutely necessary. But there's a point where the information has to be transferred, and it needs to be transferred in an open format, especially at the end of the project, to deliver the handover across to the clients. So this is kind of another visual representation of this, kind of showing how we think we can help the design coordination team. So a couple of things here is when you have the guys working in their native tools, they then send their models once a week or once a fortnight to the guy running something like Navis to do some coordination stuff. Then they often produce these reports that go out to the various people, and the information that goes out to them can be, sometimes it can be very dumb information. So sending a PDF or sending a spreadsheet to someone and saying, here's your list of clashes, is really not very helpful for that person, because they then have to manually navigate their way to fix that thing and go through the list. So having some plugins to these authoring tools, this hasn't built right. Oh, maybe it already built. Having plugins to those authoring tools so that they can transfer the information and also receive clash information is kind of where it needs to be. And you've also got the other side of the equation, which is the rest of the project team who are starting to pull together all the other stuff. And those two worlds are very disconnected at the moment. Those guys at the top, aren't getting to consume or view or contribute to that model data, and the model data is not connected to all of the other stuff. So what we've got here is here's the plugins. So the plugins, and then kind of sending around this kind of information so that you can kind of do it more seamlessly. And importantly, then you can kind of bring the people in who aren't running Navisworks, who might be, the client who's looking at it on his tablet device, and he's out, and he's able to do a walkthrough, and he might be raising a question. So they can raise a question and then send that to someone who, again, gets that inside their native tool without having to leave it. And so you have all this coordination going on, you pull all this information together, you enrich it, and then at the end of it you hand over something that's quite open to the client so that they can actually use it. So let's have a look. I hope this works. I'm doing this live, which is kind of one of those things people say never work with animals or children or do live demos, but I'm going to try it. So here I'm going to log into our environment in Aconex, where you've got now up the top all of the different modules that you normally have, plus now the new BIM module. So you come in here, and what you've got down the left is all of the model stacks. So this is where the project team set up all of the different disciplines are going to create and contribute their models up. You've got an architectural model, a structural model, an MEP model, a fire model, whatever it might be. People go in here and create those model stacks, okay? And then people upload them either from here, they can go in here and go, upload and contribute their model up, or they can go into their native tool and kind of use the connector. So I'm just going to, give me a second here, and I'm just going to bring up a little video of because I haven't got Revit installed on here, I'm going to show you the Revit connector. So this is inside Revit. Someone's opening up a model. You can see at the top there's an Aconex menu up the top, and when might try and pause that for a second. You can see there's an Aconex menu up in the ribbon, and when you open that up, you can connect to your Aconex cloud environment, and there's one button called Publish. So someone's working away, and it's a little bit like a save as, rather than having to it's a bit like a save button. So rather than having to save it down and then log in and upload, they can just click that button once. They select their project, they select their model stack, and it goes and exports all that data up and pushes up to the cloud. So that's how that all happens. And then the rest of the project team who are kind of in here can come in here and start interacting with this. So if you want to view the MEP model, you can come in here and just click on the model, and it brings it up in the browser. So this is all the MEP stuff. You can then navigate around this clearly. You can then start merging it together. So you just want to click quickly, visualize that with a structural model. You can do that. You can see the interaction and the smoothness of this is actually quite strong. But importantly, also what you can now do is this is now fully integrated to our kind of core application. So you can click on an object like this slab and see not just the slab data that came out of the model, but here there's some linked docs. You can see there's a bunch of linked docs that have been in the Aconex doc register that have now been linked up to that particular thing. So you've got like a slab specification. So someone can go, okay, that's the slab spec for that particular slab, or they can go, there's a concrete test report that someone's done and they put that up. So there's a whole bunch of things that people are starting to now link up to these objects. You can then, to add stuff, it's just literally a matter of going off and searching through your doc register and typing in a word and bring up the list of things that you want to attach on, and off you go and attach those. So that's the process of enriching the model with other stuff. So there's documents, obviously, there's all the correspondence flows like raising RFIs. So you might be in here and there might be this chiller unit here, which has got a different set of linked docs, by the way, but you can then start raising an RFI here where you can do a bit of markup. It saves a viewpoint. That viewpoint goes on the RFI. It's linked to the objects, so you can go in here and see that there's an object linked to that RFI. So you can, importantly, later on what you'll have is there might be a year's time when you've gone through the RFI process and someone raised a query about whether that's the right chiller unit to have, and then there was a change order raised and it actually got instructed to be changed. And a year later someone might come up and go, how come we've got a XYZ chiller? Well, you can actually click on that object and see not just all the stuff about it now, but you can also see the history of how it got to be what it was over its life. So that's also important. Clearly, people want to do walkthroughs and that kind of stuff, so clients are liking to do this kind of walkthrough mode. So again, this is just very, very simple of being able to, flip into a walkthrough mode and start walking around as if you're doing like, playing Wolfenstein and shoot them up and that kind of stuff. We're actually thinking about when you're going around doing inspections, how in Wolfenstein you pull out guns, well in that you pull out a clipboard and whatever it might be. But I'm going to show you just very quickly a project that has, this is just to kind of, I suppose, show off the capability of the capacity of the viewer. So here we've just got a project with a bunch of random models. They're not related to each other whatsoever. There's about 1.2, 1.3 gig worth of model data in there. And remember, I'm running on a crappy Dell laptop with no graphics card whatsoever. So just literally going down and starting to click on all of these, you'll see this starting to build up very, very quickly as these things start streaming down. And I'll go down and click them all first. Okay, so you've just got this process where they're now, I'm able to navigate around this. I'll just turn the grid off for a second. You're able to navigate around this really quickly. It's not slowing down. The performance is really slick. The zooming, the panning, all that kind of stuff is really quite performant. And you can get up to 1.2, 1.3 gig at the moment, which is soon going to be like 3 or 4 gig will be something we're aiming for in the future, and it's not too far away, but it's something we think is a real positive for project teams. They don't want to have to sit there and install software. They want to be able to do large data sets and visualize them in the browser really quickly. And you can see that it's just kind of gone through all of those. There's no tricks or shenanigans here. That's really how it performs. And it's just on, as I said, a crappy Dell laptop that doesn't have a graphics card in it. So that's something we're really pleased and proud about, and linking it up to all this other stuff and starting to allow the project team to collaborate it. So you're not ending up with, I heard before there was a term called lonely BIM, and I like that term. Like BIM by itself, the model files by themselves are quite lonely. When you start enriching it with all of the other stuff in the project, that's when you start getting real value. And when you start taking it beyond the design team, out to the rest of the project team and connecting up and having broad interaction with that data, you actually get the better result out of your project. So that's it. What you're seeing there, by the way, that's been used, that's been out in beta now for almost a year. There's been a number of projects, there's here in Australia, one in Japan, that have been using this in the beta environment, getting some great feedback on that, and we're launching this later in this year out to the broader market. Happy to take any questions if people have any, but that's, I think I've wrapped up fairly quickly, I think. Have I gone? Yeah, okay. Thanks.